move our attention from time to cost, discussing various techniques to plan cost in a project. So far, in the discussion of the planning techniques, we used a single technique, defined as bottom-up, while regarding cost, we'll discuss two alternatives, a top-down approach and a parametric approach. The basic idea of a bottom-up is pretty simple. You start by defining each single activity you need to perform in order to achieve the project scope. After that, you identify all the resources you need in order to fulfill those activities. Partially, we have done this with the WBS, the OBS, and the RAM. Now, we need to include for all the activities also the other kind of resources we may need to have a complete overview on the cost of the project. Indeed, on top of human resources, we may also have equipment, raw materials, travel, services, and so on. Then, it is important to notice from an accountability perspective that resources may either be internal or external, which may have implication on their cost and the way in which they will be accounted for. Once you define the cost for each activity, you can then put all of them together and roll it up to the project level, and at that point you will have the budget of the project. This is considered to be the best possible way to define a budget. Why it's the best? Because you start by focusing directly on the project you need to perform, so you are developing activities completely focused on what you should do. It is the most coherent method according to the approach we have so far, which would enable us to create a cost breakdown structure assigning to each activity a clear budget. Still, it is also extremely complex and time-consuming. Therefore, in many cases, other approaches are used, especially when gathering all that information. The cost for all the types of resources with a certain degree of reliability is very difficult. There are cases in which we would like to have a general idea of the budget, especially at the very beginning of the project, just to see if then we want to go into the details. The first alternative is the top-down approach. The idea again is quite simple. You start from a similar project and you use as your budget the actual budget of that project. Of course, if your project is a bit different when compared with the other one, you might adjust the numbers. You can also do something more. You can also say that your project can be divided into sub-projects, sub-parts, let's say engineering, procurement, and construction. And you might find that the engineering project is very similar to the engineering of the project A, while the procurement is more similar to the procurement of project B. And you can refer to those in order to create your budget. This kind of top-down approach is a lot faster, but as you can imagine, is a lot less precise. We need to find something in the middle, something that allows us to be fast enough but also precise enough, and this is the case of what is normally called a parametric approach. Once again, the idea is very simple. There might be one variable in your project that can be a good predictor of the total cost of the project. Let's start from an example. Let's say that we do airplanes. And we suppose that a good predictor of the final cost is gonna be given by the number of seats in my airplane. So what I can do is to refer to past projects. I can take past projects, let's say project 1, project 2, project 3, project 4, and I can go check the final cost of those projects, named C1, C2, C3, and C4. Now, what we can also do is to go to see the number of seats that we develop for those projects, named N1, N2, N3, and N4. So finally, I can calculate a parameter, let's call it alpha, which is a C1 over N1, and C2 over N2, C3 over N3, and so on. Now, the idea is that if these numbers are similar, probably this parameter is a good one that I can use in order to calculate the budget of my project. How? I just take the number of seats of my new project, I multiply it for the average of this, and I should obtain something quite similar to the final budget of the project. Once again, you can complicate the system as much as you want, meaning that you could identify a variable which is a good predictor for the engineering phase and a variable which is a good predictor for the procurement phase, and so on. So, putting these three different approaches together, we can develop the budget of a project. Typically, we start with a top-down in order to understand if more or less we are near something that is interesting for us. Then we go to a parametric, especially if the project is very long, and when we are near the operations, we go to a bottom-up approach in order to calculate at the maximum level of detail the budget of the project we are going to do.